يقوم لها شيء، وبعظمتك التي ملأت كل شيء، وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء، وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء، وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء، وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء، وبنور وجهك الذي أضاء له كل شيء. يا نور يا قدوس، يا نور يا قدوس، يا نور يا قدوس، يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تهتك العصام، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النقام، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعم، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء، اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبته وكل خطيئة أخطأتها. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك، وأستشفع بك إلى نفسك، وأسألك بجودك أن تدنيني من قربك، وأن توزعني شكرك، وأن تلهمني ذكرك. اللهم إني أسألك سؤال خاضع متذلل خاشع، أن تسامحني وترحمني، وتجعلني بقسمك راضيا قانعا، وفي جميع الأحوال متواضعا. اللهم وأسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته، وأنزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته، وعظم فيما عندك رغبته. اللهم عظم سلطانك، وعلى مكانك، وخفي مكرك، وظهر أمرك، وغلب قهرك، وجرت قدرتك، ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك. اللهم لا أجد لذنوبي غافرا، ولا لقبائحي ساترا، ولا لشيء من عملي القبيح بالحسن مبدلا غيرك. لا إله إلا أنت، سبحانك وبحمدك. ظلمت نفسي، ظلمت نفسي، ظلمت نفسي، وتجرأت بجهلي، وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك علي. اللهم مولاي، كم من قبيح سترته، وكم من فادح من البلاء أقلته، وكم من عثار وقيته، وكم من مكروه دفعته، وكم من ثناء جميل لست أهلا له نشرته. اللهم عظم بلائي، وأفرط بي سوء حالي، وقصرت بي أعمالي، وقعدت بي أغلالي، وحبسني عن نفعي بعد أملي، وخدعتني الدنيا بغرورها، ونفسي بجنايتها، ومطالي يا سيدي، فأسألك بعزتك ألا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعالي، ولا تفضحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري، ولا تعاجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملته في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي، ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي، وكثرة شهواتي وغفلتي. وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رؤوفا، وعلي في جميع الأمور عطوفا. إلهي وربي، من لي غيرك؟ أسأله كشف ضري والنظر في أمري. إلهي ومولاي، أجريت علي حكما اتبعت فيه هوى نفسي، ولم أحترس فيه من تزيين عدوي، فغرني بما أهوى وأسعده على ذلك القضاء، فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعض حدودك، وخالفت بعض أوامرك، فلك الحجة علي في جميع ذلك، ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي فيه قضاؤك، وألزمني حكمك وبلاؤك. وقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي، معتذرا نادما، منكسرا مستقيلا، مستغفرا منيبا، مقرا مذعنا معترفا، لا أجد مفرا مما كان مني، ولا مفزعا أتوجه إليه في أمري، غير قبولك عذري وإدخالك إياي في سعة من رحمتك. اللهم فاقبل عذري، وارحم شدة ضري، وفكني من شدي وثاقي. يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني، يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني، يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني، ورقة جلدي ودقة عظمي. يا من بدأ خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي، هبني لابتداء كرمك وسالف برك بي. يا إلهي وسيدي وربي، أتراك معذبي بنارك بعد توحيدك، وبعد من طوى عليه قلبي من معرفتك، ولهج به لساني من ذكرك، واعتقده ضميري من حبك، وبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خاضعا لربوبيتك. هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تضيع من ربيته، أو تبعد من أدنيته، أو تشرد من آويته، أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيته ورحمته. وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي، أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك ساجدة، وعلى ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك صادقة، وبشكرك مادحة، وعلى قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققة، وعلى ضمائر حوات من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة، وعلى جوارح سعت إلى أوطان تعبدك طائعة، وأشارت باستغفارك مذعنة. ما هكذا الظن بك، ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك. يا كريم يا رب، يا كريم يا رب، يا كريم يا رب. وأنت تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها، وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها، على أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه، قليل مكثوه، يسير بقاؤه، قصير مدته. فكيف احتمالي لبلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكاره فيها، وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه، ولا يخفف عن أهله، لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك. وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض. يا سيدي فكيف بي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل الحقير المسكين المستكين؟ يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي، لأي الأمور إليك أشكو، ولما منها أضج وأبكي؟ لأليم العذاب وشدته، أم لطول البلاء ومدته؟ فلئن صيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك، وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك، وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك، فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي. صبرت على عذابك، فكيف أصبر على فراقك؟ وهبني صبرت على حر نارك، فكيف أصبر عن النظر إلى كرامتك؟ أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجائي عفوك؟ فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا، لئن تركتني ناطقا لأدجن إليك بين أهلها ضجيج الآمنين، ولأصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين، ولأبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين، ولأنادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين، يا غاية آمال العارفين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين، ويا إله العالمين. أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفته، وذاق طعم عذابها بمعصيته، وحبس بين أطباقها بجرمه وجريرته، وهو يضج إليك ضجيج مؤمل لرحمتك، ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك، ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك. يا مولاي، فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك؟ أم كيف تؤلمه النار وهو يأمل فضلك ورحمتك؟ أم كيف يحرقه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانه؟ أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفه؟ أم كيف يتقلقل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقه؟ أم كيف تزجره زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا رب؟ أم كيف يرجو فضلك في عتقه منها فتتركه فيها؟ هيهات، ما ذلك الظن بك، ولا المعروف من فضلك، ولا مشبه لما عاملت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك. فباليقين أقطع لولا ما حكمت به من تعذيب جاحديك، وقضيت به من إخلاد معانديك، لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما، وما كانت لأحد فيها مقرا ولا مقاما، لكنك تقدست أسماؤك أقسمت أن تملأها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين، وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين. وأنت جل ثناؤك قلت مبتدئا، وتطولت بالإنعام متكرما، أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون. إلهي وسيدي، فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها، وبالقضية التي حتمتها وحكمتها، وغلبت من عليه أجريتها، أن تهب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمته، وكل ذنب أذنبته، وكل قبيح أسررته، وكل جهل عملته، كتمته أو أعلنته، أخفيته أو أظهرته، وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني، وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جوارحي، وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم، والشاهد لما خفي عنهم، وبرحمتك أخفيته، وبفضلك سترته، وأن توفر حظي من كل خير أنزلته، أو إحسان فضلته، أو بر نشرته، أو رزق بسطته، أو ذنب تغفره، أو خطأ تستره. يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا ربي يا ربي يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك رقي، يا من بيده ناصيتي، يا عليما بضري ومسكنتي، يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب. أسألك بحقك وقدسك وأعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي من الليل والنهار بذكرك معمورة، وبخدمتك موصولة، وأعمالي عندك مقبولة، حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا، وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا. يا سيدي يا من عليه معولي، يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب. قو على خدمتك جوارحي، واشدد على العزيمة جوانحي، وهب لي الجد في خشيتك، والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك، حتى أسرح إليك في ميادين السابقين، وأسرع إليك في المبارزين، وأشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين، وأدنو منك دنو المخلصين، وأخافك مخافة الموقنين، وأجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين. اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فأرده، ومن كادني فكيده، واجعل لي من أحسن عبيدك نصيبا عندك، وأقربهم منزلة منك، وأخصهم زلفة لديك، فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك. وجد لي بجودك، واعطف علي بمجدك، واحفظني برحمتك، واجعل لساني بذكرك لهجا، وقلبي بحبك متيما، ومن علي بحسن إجابتك، وأقلني عثرتي، واغفر زلتي، فإنك قضيت على عبادك بعبادتك، وأمرتهم بدعائك، وضمنت لهم الإجابة. فإليك يا ربي نصبت وجهي، وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي، فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي وبلغني مناي ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي يا سريع الرضا يا سريع الرضا يا سريع الرضا اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء فإنك فعال لما تشاء يا من اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء وطاعته غناء ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء وسلاحه البكاء يا سابغ النعم يا دافع النقام يا نور المستوحشين في الظلام يا عالما لا يعلم صل على محمد وآل محمد وفعل به ما أنت أهله وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا. My foot's asleep, so I'm just. So no slides tonight. Inshallah, pull them out with your phones, the ones that we sent, inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa alihi al-Tahirin. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajjal farajahum. So we got through the introductory part of our discussions. We went through Al-Kitab. We got into As-Sunnah and Al-Hadith Al-Sharif, or the akhbar that we wanted to discuss. We haven't finished that yet, but we're coming towards the end of that. The discussion on the Sunnah and these khabar wahids that we have, akhbar al-ahad that we have, one of the big discussions we have here is a discussion called at-tasamuh fi adillat al-sunan. That sounds very fancy. Tasamuh fi adillat al-sunan. Let's break that down real quick, word for word. Tasamuh means flexibility. It means to be a little easygoing. Tasamuh. And not be so strict. Fi means in regards to. Adillat al-sunan. Adillah, you can just put hadiths instead of adillah. For now, we'll say it like that. So, easygoingness, right? Flexibility in regards to those hadiths, those khabar wahids, let's call it, that have to do with the sunan. Sunan, opposite to fara'id. Fara'id means the wajibat and the harams. So anything that it's better for us to do, but not to the point where it's binding on us to do. Meaning what? Meaning mustahabbat, meaning etiquettes and so on. These things. So there is this discussion because of certain hadiths we have. The main reason for this discussion is certain hadiths that we have, okay? Now these hadiths are the main reason, I would say, but others have argued in other ways as well for this rule that we want to talk about right now, okay? The rule says, and this rule we'll have to see if it's accepted or not by these great ulama. But the proposed rule is that if we have a hadith that might even be weak, okay? If we have a hadith that says a certain thing is mustahab, or says that a certain thing has this much reward for it, if you do this, if you do that, this deed, that action has this much reward. And it turns out that this hadith was made up. As a matter of fact, when the hadith even came to you, it was a weak one. You knew it's a weak one. You know it's not a very reliable one. But because the subject of the hadith is those things that are not binding, they're not wajib or haram, but what are they? They're mustahabbat. It says if you fast on this day, you get this many rewards. You looked at the hadith, it didn't even have a chain of narrators. Okay? It didn't even have a chain of narrators. But you say, man, the rewards are big. The ROI is up there. And so one day for fast, I fast and then I get this much reward. Let's do it anyway. Some have argued that there's a rule that we have that just because you had a weak hadith here, it still counts and you will get the rewards for that. Now we'll have to break this down and see if this is the case or not. Even if we believe that Allah will reward that person. But what is the rule exactly trying to say here? Is the rule trying to say that all weak hadiths are reliable and authentic and hujjah on you? Even if as long as they have something to do with mustahabbat, is that what it is or no? Is just the hadiths that we're going to cover in a little bit, are they telling us that, look, Allah's going to give you the rewards even though the hadith wasn't hujjah on you? What is it exactly trying to say? We'll get to that. So that's just in a nutshell, just so we get a little familiar with the discussion. But who breaks down the discussion for us? Let's go to Shaheed Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr in his book Al-Halaq al-Thaniya, Durusun fi Ilm al-Usul. May Allah bless his soul. Every time I see his picture, you just remember how much hardship he went through at the hands of the Saddam and the Saddamites. Anyway, he says, this discussion on tasamuh fi adilat al-sunan, I'm reading off of his book. It says, as was mentioned before, a non-thiqa khabar, so an unreliable one that doesn't have a proper chain of narrators. A non-thiqa khabar is not hujjah. We've already talked about this, right? Unless we have clues for its veracity. If you remember, I said just because something doesn't have a strong chain of narrators, don't throw it away and discard it. Yeah, we can still use it if we find other clues that help us be convinced that this is a proper hadith. Okay, so he says unless we have clues for its veracity, otherwise a khabar wahid that's not thiqa is not hujjah. We have already discussed this. Everyone knows this. An exception, he says, to this rule is the hadiths we have for istihbab and karaha, things that are mustahab and makruh. Istihbab means to be mustahab. Karaha means to be makruh. Okay, it's just an infinitive. He says an exception to this rule that says weak hadiths are not hujjah. There's an exception to this. Some weak hadiths can be hujjah. What is it? The ones that have to do with istihbab and karaha. As long as we don't have certainty for their total invalidity. Sometimes you're 100% sure this is made up. Your friend comes up to you and says, hey, guess what? I made a hadith up today. Whoever fasts on this date, gets it counts for all of their fasts that they've missed throughout their life. One of my relatives, he was kidding around once. He was like, I don't need to fast anymore because I fasted a lot when I was young. So that covered, for later. I said, that's not how it works, brother. So if someone makes something up, comes up to you, they're just kidding around, whatever. Obviously, he says that doesn't count. But no, if there's a chance, if there's a reasonable possibility that this weak hadith, that's not hujjah, that this hadith was actually said, that's enough for it to become hujjah. Why? Because it has to do with mustahabbat, not wajibat and muharramat. He says this is an exception to that rule. He's just doesn't mean that he believes in this rule. He's just telling us that there is this argument, there is this discussion. Where'd you get this from, Shaykh Sadr? He says a set of sahih and non-sahih hadiths are referred to in support of this notion. It's because of those hadiths. Otherwise, we wouldn't make an exception here. Weak hadith is weak hadith. I don't get religion from weak hadith. But he says, no, there are some sahih even, reliable hadiths that tell us you can do this. We'll read them in a minute. These hadiths, he says, imply if it reaches us, something reaches you, a report, a khabar reaches you. If it reaches us that a specific action or deed has certain rewards and we act upon them for those rewards, we will get them, even if the hadith wasn't actually uttered by the Prophet ﷺ. The argument presented for this is that these hadiths are actually granting hujjiyya to any hadith that reaches us, as long as it reaches us. And as long as it's conveying mustahabbat, not wajibat, okay? Now, there is a whole discussion, does this mean mustahabbat only or even makruhat? There's a discussion there, whatever, it's not that important. Right now, I just want us to, get an idea of what's going on with this discussion. All right, well, what are these hadiths? I'm going to share with you the two ones that have been claimed to have sahih and proper chains of narrators, okay? One hadith says that Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam said, if one learns from a hadith that for a certain act there is a certain reward and he performs that act, he will receive such a reward even if, in fact, the hadith may not be as such. It was a made-up hadith. So this is like a bonus from Allah. Another hadith here. That was in Al-Kafi. This one is in Al-Mahasin. It says that Imam al-Sadiq said, whosoever it reaches from the Prophet ﷺ, a given reward for a deed, and so they perform it, they will receive that particular reward even if the Prophet had never said such a thing. Okay? So, by the way, wow, that's pretty cool actually. But what kind of rule can we derive from these hadiths? And these are just two of them. There's more. There's like 6 or 7 or 8, if not more even, that say the same thing. Now, I was surprised because some scholars, they said, look, for us this is not mutawatir. All right, but it's pretty high in number. 7 or 8 hadiths, we'll have to see, are they different chains or do the chains overlap? That plays a role in something being mutawatir or not. That's a whole lot of hadiths though that we have. But most of them, as I said, they're not sahih hadiths. But we also have sahih ones in there. And so putting all of these together, you're kind of convinced that this is something that we have in the culture of the Ahlul Bayt. Okay? So the Ahlul Bayt are trying to push this idea. Now, these hadiths, if we want to understand a rule from them, what kind of rule can we derive from them? This part gets a little technical. Is it that, now Shaykh Sadr here, he mentions 4 things here. There's others who have mentioned more, I didn't feel the need to go into those details. But he says, number 1, some will say that these hadiths, look what they're doing. They're saying that, remember we had a rule that only reliable khabar wahid that checks the boxes is hujjah? Remember we said that? There's an exception to this rule. Even if it doesn't check the boxes, it's hujjah. So long as it's talking about what? A mustahab act, not a wajib or haram act. He says some people, that's what they understand from these hadiths. As a result, this understanding, you see I wrote in parentheses at the end, I said this is going to be an usuli rule that we take from it, an usuli discussion. Usul al-fiqh, what we're covering in our sessions of Ijtihad and Taqlid is mostly usul al-fiqh. Usul al-fiqh told us what is hujjah and what is not hujjah, remember? Well, if I'm understanding from these hadiths that weak hadiths that have to do with mustahabbat are hujjah, once you say the word hujjah, that means it's an usuli discussion. So, some will take these hadiths to learn something that is usuli from them. But some will say, no. It's not that weak hadiths are hujjah, but rather these hadiths are letting us know that Allah has a pen and paper ready. When a weak hadith is made up, the person who made it up is going to be in trouble for sure. Okay? But this hadith now spreads amongst the people. And they are going to start acting upon it. Man, I wish I could say some examples. I'm not gonna. Of some of the things that we do that we think are mustahab, but they're not necessarily mustahab. Anyway, the people are widely practicing them now. Someone will say, these hadiths are telling me that God has a paper and pencil, so to speak. And he's like, okay, now that people believe that this is mustahab because there was a weak hadith for it, I'm going to actually make it mustahab. And I'm going to write that reward for it as well. What does this sound like? Does this sound like something that we covered way back 20 sessions ago? We talked about tasweeb and how Allah, if a mujtahid gets it wrong, the Shia don't believe this, but some others do. Others believe that, some others, not all Ahl Sunnah, but some might believe that although the mujtahid gets it wrong, but Allah is going to write another or make up another legislation right there that's in accordance with the mistake that they make. In other words, mujtahid is always right. We said we're not musawwiba, we don't believe in tasweeb, we believe in takhti'ah. But anyway, this kind of sounds like that Allah is actually legislating on the spot. That's what some say this is what these hadiths are telling us. Right? So the weak hadith was not hujjah. But it's letting me know that since there's a weak hadith for this matter, Allah takes his pen and paper out and actually adds to his book of laws, the mustahab laws. And he says this is mustahab and this is the reward for it. Now, in these two cases, if you see, it says istihbab check mark. That means that whether you follow the first understanding or you follow the second understanding, in both these cases, that act becomes mustahab on you. And you can do it with the intention of istihbab. Because the weak hadith was hujjah on you. Hujjah means you can have the intention of wajib, mustahab, makruh, whatever. Or it's that Allah actually made something mustahab. In His real knowledge, immaculate knowledge, He actually made something mustahab. Okay, so I'm going to have the intention of istihbab. That's what I'm understanding from the hadith. I can have that intention. Very good. But there's other understandings from these hadiths as well that are different than these first two. The third one, he says, that some say, no, these hadiths, all they're doing is they're reminding us of the importance of practicing ihtiyat in mustahab matters, something the intellect understands on its own. So these will be irshadi commands. These are just commands that are letting us know, or these are just statements that are letting us know and reminding us, hey, isn't it good if a weak hadith comes to you? It says Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said this, that on this day of the calendar, if you do this, it has this many rewards. Don't you think it's a good idea to do ihtiyat? What if it's true? And so with the intention of ihtiyat, or as we say, with the intention of raja'ul matlubiyya, with the hopes that it is mustahab to do it. That's what these hadiths are saying. All right? Now there's a big problem here though. There's a big problem with this understanding. And that is that, okay, if these hadiths are reminding us that it's good to do things, that we think might be mustahab, but with the intention of raja'ul matlubiyya, the problem is the hadiths were telling us you're not going to get rewarded for ihtiyat and practicing precaution. You're going to get the reward of that thing that made up hadith was telling you. Or I don't want to say made up, but that da'if and weak hadith was telling you. If these hadiths that we had are telling us, are reminding us that, hey, look, if something comes, it's good to, to be on the safe side. You don't want to miss out if it actually was mustahab. You don't want to miss out on those rewards. Then you should be getting, if let's just say that hadith was actually made up and those rewards were all fake. If these hadiths are telling us that, just reminding us to do ihtiyat in these matters, we should be rewarded for taking ihtiyat. But who says I should get the rewards of that matter, that made up thing? Like, in Farsi we say as kise khalife mi bakhshi, right? You're not paying out of your own pocket, you're paying out of Allah's pocket. Hey people, God is going to reward you this much. Who said? If your understanding is that these hadiths are just reminding us how good it is to do ihtiyat in things, then we get rewarded for doing ihtiyat. Like on the Day of Judgment, let's say if there's a hadith that tells me if I fast on such and such day, I get rewards of 1,000 hajj. But it was a made up hadith. All right, on the Day of Judgment, Allah will reward me because I did ihtiyat and I went ahead and fasted just in case it was mustahab, but it wasn't really mustahab. Allah on the Day of Judgment will pat my back and say, good job, you did some ihtiyat here and you deserve some reward. He's not going to give me 1,000 hajj because that wasn't the promise to begin with. But He will give me a lot of reward because at least I tried. So this third understanding is a cool understanding, but it doesn't yield those rewards necessarily. But those hadiths were telling us you get those rewards. So you can tell it's a little bit more than this. And that's where the fourth one comes in. Allah is promising a reward identical to what the hadith say because there's a good reason for that. Allah wants us to practice ihtiyat. There's a good reason. Practicing ihtiyat is a good thing. And to encourage us, what does Allah do? Allah, what He does is, He promises us those kinds of rewards, although He didn't have to. Shaykh Sadr, he says, I believe in the third and fourth together, a mix of these two. They're reminding us of how important ihtiyat is, number one, and number two, God is going out of His way and giving me a bonus here. Okay? Now, if you look at the number, and by the way, here I have that parentheses, no istihbab though. If a person, right, is not convinced that those hadiths are actually making something mustahab, that means it's not mustahab, and you're not sure at the end of the day. All you know is, I should practice ihtiyat here. So if I'm going to do something that's in mafatihul jinan, that my marja hasn't spoken about, I do it with what intention? Mustahab. Well, this is a mistake a lot of people make in our centers. Everything in mafatihul jinan is mustahab. Who said? Everything your marja says is reliable in mafatih, you can do with the intention of istihbab. Other than that, what do you do it with? You do it with the intention of, I'm doing this just in case it was mustahab. And this is called raja'ul matlubiyya. You don't have to memorize the Arabic. Raja'ul matlubiyya means in hopes of it actually being mustahab. That's what the intention you're doing it with. Because we are not allowed to do something with such an intention when we're not sure if it's part of religion or not. That's bid'ah. Shia are the biggest bid'ah haters, but then sometimes, practically, we fall into that. Yeah? It's okay. But we're educating ourselves. Now, if you notice, over here on the number 2 understanding, it's going to be a fiqhi discussion. It won't be a usuli one anymore. I don't want to get into the details. But number 3 is a kalami and theological discussion. These hadiths are going to be theological ones. What are they saying? They're letting us know that, look, God is that type of person, I mean, you know what I mean by person, that kind of person that won't let your efforts go in vain. It goes back to His lutf. It goes back to His grace. This is not a fiqhi discussion anymore. It's not an usuli discussion anymore. It has nothing to do with legal theory and wajib and haram and ahkam anymore. This is a theological discussion now. Yeah? That is letting us know that God is so great, His grace is so encompassing, that even if I mistakenly followed a weak hadith because I was convinced, Allah will still give me those rewards. Now, these are the different possibilities. But what's our final verdict? Well, I like what Shaykh Haidar Hubbullah says in his book. Now, he dedicates 150 pages to this discussion, by the way. I've never seen that much dedicated to this discussion before. But that's just how he is. And so because we skipped him in the previous discussion of khabar wahid and non-fiqhi matters, I was like, you know what? Let's see what he talks about a little bit. Because I'm very inclined to what he says, which is also very close to what other greats like even Shaykh Sadr and others are saying as well, but a little different. I won't necessarily agree with everything he says, but I found it to be very reasonable. Anyway, what does he say? Well, he says these hadiths are retrospective. This is very important. I really like what he says here, and I'll explain in a minute. These hadiths are retrospective. They're looking to the past. They're not looking to the future. I'll explain that. And not one's pushing us to move in a certain direction by giving hujjiyah to weak hadiths or legislating a separate istihbab or even reminding us of the importance of ihtiyat. Then what are they saying? What are they saying? If they're not pushing us in that direction, if they're not telling us to do ihtiyat, although we all know ihtiyat is good, but that's not what the job of these hadiths is, then what is the job of them? He says they are letting us know of a rule when it comes to reward and punishment in the eyes of Allah. What is that rule? That if a person is convinced, you see this is important, is convinced, okay? There's a special reward for a given deed, for example, through a hadith, and thus performs it, and it just so happens to not be the case, Allah will not fail this person's conviction and hope and reward them accordingly. Will reward them accordingly. That's what these hadiths are saying. So in other words, they're not even trying to tell us, hey, people, ihtiyat is good. They're just saying, people, there are cases where you will find out maybe that I did something, even if it means on the Day of Judgment, you find out that what you did wasn't actually mustahab. But you were told it's mustahab. There was a reliable hadith even that came to you. Look at that. there was a reliable hadith that came to you with a superstar chain of narrators. All of them are superstars. But still, even that hadith was wrong. You followed it. Later on, when you find out, or even if you don't find out, retrospective, what you did in the past, all of that Allah will take care of. You do what you're supposed to do, and the rest will be taken care of. It's not talking about necessarily even weak hadiths. Where in the hadiths that we covered, in those two hadiths that I covered, where did it say if a weak hadith reaches you? It said if it reaches you, right? If it reaches you, and I'll talk about this a little bit later. Reaches you, sometimes something, you hear something, you don't give it attention. Reaches you here might mean something more, something that's convincing to you. Not any weak hadith is convincing. Not any weak hadith do you pay attention to. But if it so happens that you pay attention to something, you go by it, yeah, retrospectively speaking, it's not like Allah's going to fail you over there and disappoint you. No. Well, the rewards will be given. Why? Who said? Because these hadiths are saying. That's what he says. He says these hadiths are not trying to, and this is important now, to establish a culture of doing things with the intention of raja'ul matlubiyya. This is very important. I don't know, hopefully I can get it across. It's a very interesting point, whether a person agrees or disagrees. We, in our communities, what we've gotten used to is that anything we hear, right away we say, let's just do it with raja'ul matlubiyya. Let's do it with the intention, maybe it's mustahab. No. Burnout is real, brothers and sisters. Burnout is real. A'mal, burnout is real. So if a hadith or something, I see it and I know it's weak. I wish I could say examples. Should I give examples? I don't know. Should I not? There's some of those out there. There's some things out there that some of us, we are very adamant about. When you look into it, you find that there's one hadith that Ahlus Sunnah are also narrating, and even they're saying is wrong, because half of the narrators, we don't even know who they are. 2 or 3 of them are even not even Shia, and so on and so forth. But we've made such a big deal out of it. Like when I look at that, I'm like, okay, man, this is probably something made up. And then the reward doesn't match the amal. Like there's got to be some correspondence here, right? All right. In cases like these, we'll have cases like these. A person will look at these hadiths that we covered here, these adillat al-sunan, this rule of tasamuh fi adillat al-sunan, and say, look, they're establishing a culture of whatever you hear, just do it with raja'ul matlubiyya, with that intention. He's saying not necessarily. It's not saying, hey people, now that this is the case, go out and do whatever you can, no matter how weak it is, no matter. He's saying, look, if you're convinced, you do something and then you find out later, or you don't find out, but it just so happened that it wasn't real, Allah will take care of that. Not that now a culture is established, people of doing everything and anything that they hear about, even if it's through a WhatsApp message that came from India or Iran or Pakistan or wherever. Not necessarily. Because there are ramifications to this. We'll talk about that a little bit maybe in the notes section. We'll get there. He says, and then finally he says, these hadiths are kalami ones. Obviously, because that what he's getting out of it is that God is not going to disappoint you. When you're talking about God and how He is and how His attributes are, that's theology. It's not an usuli discussion anymore. It's not a fiqhi discussion. Although this whole rule is discussed in fiqhi / usuli circles and contexts, but it's not really a fiqhi / usuli discussion, he says. I personally agree. That's how I see it. All right, so if that's the case, that's his final verdict, and others have said very similar things to him. Let's go to that final slide, which is the notes here. Very important notes that we have to keep in mind if this is the case now, that these hadiths will not be a reason for me to move towards something I am pretty sure is made up, even with the intention of raja'ul matlubiyya. It takes half my day, yeah, and there's a very, very weak hadith that I'm pretty sure is wrong, but because we've been doing it all along, we have to still do it. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Now, we do have to pick our battles. Hey, I'll take this over my young guy going somewhere where he's not supposed to be on a certain night, right? And have him on that night to be in the center maybe to do something. I mean, I'll do that. We'll pick our battles, but yeah. Personally, if I'm at home, I don't know. I might do something else that I'm sure is super mustahab. I might do Salat of Ja'far Tayyar. Super, ultra mustahab, set in stone. Everyone believes in it. The Maraja have given fatwas on it being mustahab. We might have not done it once in our lifetime, but then all of a sudden, Laylatul Raghaib sounds so nice. Yeah, this is the night of, and I'm not trying to, like, we have done these amal before, and I'm not trying to undermine that necessarily, but all I'm saying is that Salat of Ja'far Tayyar is 1,000 times more reliable than this other one, right? And so if I was to do something on that night, the first Friday night and Thursday night of the month of Rajab, you know what I would do? I would do that one probably over this one. That's what I'm trying to. The solid ones, we don't do them like maybe once in our lifetime even. The solid mustahab ones, and then but we do the other ones that are not solid. We don't even have raja al matlubiyya in our intention, by the way. We usually have mustahab, rather wajib sometimes even. Okay, next note here and point. Mustahab and makruh are still part of religion, brothers and sisters. And so I won't be convinced about the rewards of something unless a reliable hadith tells me so. This means I can't perform everything in mafatih with the intention of mustahab. At the end of the day, I know we have raja al-matlubiyya as a way out. And we don't have to necessarily believe something is mustahab. But at the end of the day, mustahab and makruh is also part of religion, is it not? And so if it's part of religion, then I have to follow the hadiths that are hujjah on me, which check the boxes again. Why weak hadith? Why? Right? Yeah. For example, in Mafatih, Sheikh Abbas Qummi, because I'm going to explain this because I don't want it to be misunderstood here. I'm not taking shots at Mafatih at all. I will do things that might not have a strong chain in it myself, a lot, okay? But the point I'm trying to make is something else. At least let it be something that Sheikh Abbas Qummi has narrated from a few of these other books, some of the greats have narrated, then have Raja al-Matlubiyya. But if someone does their work, does their research, and comes to the conclusion that something really is very weak, we get our deen from the strong narrations, not from the weak ones. Why, how does it make sense? The hadiths didn't tell us, oh, go after the weak ones. It said whoever reaches them. Man balaghahu. Whoever it reaches them. Some have pointed this out. Why is the word balagha used? Why didn't it just say man sami'a or things like that? Whoever hears it. Why didn't it say that? Because reaching someone kind of, they say, implies that it's something that's reliable. You don't give time of day to just anything you hear throughout the day. No. Those things that are reliable, have some substance and are kind of substantial, are the ones that you give them some attention. It should reach that point at least. That's all I'm saying. Because who are we kidding? This is religion. This is religion we're talking about. Mustahab and makruh is part of religion. I can't just say something's mustahab without having a proper reason for it. That's bid'ah. Number 3, if we aren't careful and have a maximalist approach to these hadiths, these akhbar man balagh they're called, it can open the doors to problems and burnout and even bid'ah. I've explained that already. So we have to be extra careful about these. The burnout thing is a big one, by the way. Keep that in mind. These hadiths highlight the greatness of Allah because He didn't have to do any of this. He could have just said, I don't care. I already gave you the rules. The rules were follow reliable hadiths. Yeah? You should have done your homework. Why were you convinced? But no, it says even if someone is convinced for whatever reason, then Allah takes care of that. And finally, this discussion strongly highlights the importance of tajarri and inqiyad. Okay, this is important here. We have a discussion in usul called tajarri versus inqiyad. Tajarri comes from jur'at. Okay? When you have the audacity to do something, you have jur'ah. Okay? Now, the example for tajarri is if I have a cup of water in front of me. And I don't know it's a cup of water. I think it's an intoxicant, actually. I think it's a haram drink. And so because of that, I'm like, you know what? I'm feeling sin today. So I'm going to drink this wine, this clear water-colored wine. I don't even know if we have something like that. And so I drink it with the intention of it being wine. I thought it was wine. Turns out it was water. There's a big discussion here. Reality of the matter, was it haram or not? It was water, wasn't it? So it's not haram, right? But I drank it thinking that it's haram. Do I get sin here or not? Oh mujtahideen. Do I get sin or not? She's nodding yes. Yes or no? Yes? But it was water. intention, the rules of God, they revolve around the reality of things. Remember, we talked about this in our, from day one. We said Allah's rules revolve around the good and bad in things. There was no bad here. So if there's no bad, there should be no sin. I'm just playing devil's advocate. Huh? Maulana's advocate. So, yeah. But in reality, it wasn't bad. After drinking, I found out in reality it wasn't bad. You see? But here, the majority of ulama and maraji and all of that, including myself, I'm one of them, believe that, obviously, as you said, this is called tajarri. It wasn't something that was actually problematic in and of itself, but it's tajarri. Tajarri. So everything revolves around, as you said, here. Yeah? True, the rules are based on the reality of things. But in the end, we don't have immaculate knowledge of things. Everything revolves around my knowledge of things, of my knowledge of the reality of things, even though it might be wrong sometimes. Anyway, the opposite of tajarri is inqiyad. The one we don't talk about often. We usually talk about tajarri, we don't talk about inqiyad. Inqiyad is the exact opposite. Anyone have a guess of what inqiyad means? It's the exact opposite of tajarri. Huh? Say it, it's okay. What's the exact opposite of tajarri? I thought something was bad, I had it, turns out it was water. What's the exact opposite of this? Huh? Yeah, well, I mean, that is the opposite of it, of the example that I gave, but the opposite of tajarri is going to be, I think something Allah likes it. Over there I thought it's something that Allah hates, but I had it. Here I think something Allah loves it and I do it with that intention. Turns out it wasn't something Allah loves. This is called inqiyad. I thought this was mustahab. I did it with that intention. Turns out it wasn't mustahab. So these hadiths are letting us know, the same way you can get in trouble with tajarri, they're letting us know the importance of inqiyad. In the end, how Allah wants to see how much obedience I'm exhibiting. That's what Allah wants to see. So sometimes I might be convinced something's mustahab, it's not, and I do it. You can't say, oh, it wasn't mustahab in reality. This is called inqiyad. The importance of inqiyad. And by extension, the importance of obedience and disobedience. And Tabatabai, he talks about this. We've talked about this in our Barzakh class again and again. We've talked about this. How if a person does their due diligence and comes to the conclusion that, I don't know, Christianity is the right way, let's just say. They really, really did their homework, and between them and Allah, between them and God, this is where God's satisfaction was for them, and that's why they embraced it and they practiced it. Who says? Tabatabai says, who says they don't make it? Yeah? This is inqiyad. They tried their best. This is obedience. They got it wrong though. Well, it's this, at the end of the day, it's just like that person who thought something was mustahab, but they went after it, but still Allah rewards. Theologically, how is it possible for Allah not to accept from such a person? Yeah, if it was their fault that they don't know the truth, if it's their fault they didn't embrace the proper faith, that's a different story. But assuming they were never convinced, they tried their best, they really wanted God's satisfaction in everything they do. And so here it says this discussion strongly highlights the importance of tajarri versus inqiyad, and also echoes what the Tabatabais have said regarding how what matters in Allah's eyes in the end is submission versus and obedience versus disobedience. Yeah. So this is the entire discussion of at-tasamuh fi adillati sunan. So it's not black and white, 0 or 100. Either I take these hadiths and these hadiths are saying all weak hadiths of mustahab acts are hujjah on you. Doesn't mean that's the case. No, I can still believe in these hadiths, but they can have theological implications. Some have even questioned the veracity of these hadiths. Others have said, no, there's some sahih ones in there, we're going to take them, but they're talking about a theological thing, not necessarily that usuli matter that some people have seen it as. Yeah. All in all, brothers and sisters, yeah, we have to be very careful. The religion is something we have to be very cautious about when we add things to it and ascribe and attribute things to it. There we have to try our best, do our work. If we got it wrong, these kinds of hadiths are saying, hey, you're still good, inshallah. Any questions before we end? Yes. Mm-hmm. So that's a good question for those of us who are not experts. How do we discern between those weak ones and those ones that are not weak? In the end, yes, this whole idea of doing things with hopes of them being mustahab is enough. I don't want us to leave tonight thinking that, oh, we need to change anything. All I'm trying to say is that there will be some things out there when they are brought to our attention that, guys, this one, you don't need to spend 3 hours on this one because this one's probably made up. You want to spend 3 hours? Spend 1 hour on this, it's better. These cases, when they do come up, and someone who you can follow their word and accept their word, in these cases, we can understand that, okay, there is we can be a little more softer towards accepting that idea. That's all that's being said. So for us, practically, yeah, after this discussion, still we're gonna do mafati. We're gonna go by the mafati. We will have the intention of, inshallah, it's mustahab. Some of the things of mafati, our maraji have talked about. They've done the research in those, and they have said that this is mustahab. So in those cases, we can have that intention. Otherwise, lots of the amal that we do, we're just doing them because they're a remembrance of Allah. They're us invoking Allah and doing dua to Allah on a night of Qadr, for example. We do that with the intention of, inshallah, getting closer to Him and getting those rewards, if they are actual rewards for that thing that we're doing, to get those rewards as well. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And that's why our maraji haven't done extensive work on a book like Mafati to go and check all of the different hadiths that he brings and make sure this one's mustahab, this one's not, this one's mustahab. We don't want to be OCD about these things. Yeah? They haven't, because they say, look, the matter is an easy one when it comes to these things. You have that intention of, I do it with raja'ul matlubiyya, the intention of, inshallah, it is something that's matlub, it is something that, yeah, is mustahab in Allah's eyes. Yeah. Hopefully we're clear on this, inshallah. We're going to still do our amal, okay? All right. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Salawat. السلام عليك يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام على الحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة. السلام على 9 المعصومين من ولد الحسين. السلام عليك يا مولانا يا صاحب الزمان. عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك وظهورك. السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.